This is Legal Angle with Emmanuel the Law Holloway. Today is July 11, 2020, and having a special guest with me, a woman who has been a judge for over 24 years. She has presided over 1,000 cases. Only, I know she probably has the numbers. She's been a judge on the domestic court for 24 years. And today she's going to be answering questions about the court, custody cases, and divorce cases. Can you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Manuel.
Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you. It's Dana Preisse, spelled that way, a little differently. Been a judge. I'm in my 24th year. I'm in the domestic relations and juvenile division and have handled well over 100,000 cases, 10,000 domestic violence cases alone. We handle, of course, at our court all of the divorces, all of the custody cases between people that are married and not married, all of the traffic, all the juvenile issues, juvenile crime from traffic to aggravated robbery and murders. I've started a couple drug courts and a community garden at the Juvenile Intervention Center, president of the Ohio Association of Domestic Relations Judges, and would just say I love my job. I get to meet people from all walks of life. I get to work with a wonderful group of other attorneys and staff. We have a very diverse staff, and I just love my job. That's why I'm running again, because I just really enjoy what I do. Thanks.
So, what has been the changes you've noticed since you got on the bench 24 years ago?
Wow. On the domestic relations end of it, probably the biggest thing we've seen is the increased number of people that are self-representing. We call them, pro se litigants is the Latin term, but people that are representing themselves is just exploding. And we've addressed that by, we've created a self-represented resource clinic that is manned by or womaned by the Capitol Law School, some lawyers there. They don't really give legal advice, but they help with all of the paperwork that is required when you get divorced, the decrees, and if you have children, the child support worksheets and affidavits. And so that center is really a godsend for us when it comes to the self-represented people. And we've seen a big spike, I would say, over the years, up to close to 3,000 cases per year of domestic violence. I think that's been a big, increase over the 24 years I've seen it. The opioid crisis is a really dramatic change. We see pretty much weekly, daily. I mean, when you're duty judge every 6 weeks, you have every time you're duty judge, some relative coming in and asking for emergency custody of their niece, grandchild, nephew, whatever, because one or both of the parents are disappeared, they're out on the streets doing heroin or fentanyl, or they've passed away, or they're jailed. So that's kind of a dramatic thing I've seen. On the juvenile court side of things, it's kind of a positive thing. We used to have about 120 kids sometimes at the high level of what we would see in our juvenile detention center, which the name is now the Juvenile Intervention Center, because that's really more of our goal. And the average number now is about 53, teenagers per day in the center. And that is because we have focused on, trying to rehab youth and have many more programs than we used to have in the past to try to achieve that. So, that's an improvement, I'd say, on the juvenile side. So that, a lot of progress in that end.
Wow. Is there a reason where we have more pro se litigants? Could it be because attorneys are more expensive, or what do you think is the reason for it?
I think it's a couple things. I think just as people did not know how to do their own travel, we used to have travel agents because you didn't know how to do it and couldn't do it. Now people can go online, learn how to do things, get the forms. They don't do as well as attorneys usually. I mean, I would highly recommend anyone to hire an attorney. I think they can't afford it too. I mean, I think that's part of it. Attorneys are expensive. Some of the divorces are not real complicated. so they can do it themselves. But certainly, as a court, it's much easier for us, especially if it's a complicated case or a custody case, for folks to have representation because they just know what they're doing. Lawyers do for the most part. So,
How has COVID-19 affected your court and case schedules?
wow. It has, I'll tell you how it affects my recovery court when I talk about that. But in general, right after COVID started, I was still doing, when people asked, uncontested divorces from my kitchen table with my robe on. We could do Zooms. And I think that is a positive thing because we can now do pre-trials and status conferences by Zoom. And I think that's going to continue because you don't really need to be down in court to do that. But of course, we've got plexiglass up. I kind of hate it because I like the personal interaction, and now the personal interaction is minimalized, and people come in with masks. It's hard to see them, and you want to get them in and out as fast as you can, and not lingering in the hall. So that's really sad. I mean, I like the days of shaking hands and hugging people, and that's changed. I hope only temporarily. But we're slowly coming back and doing trials. Some of the other judges have already been in trial. I have a big one coming up, in a week or two. So
It's a big change. Yeah. When it comes to domestic court, some people do abuse the liberal filing system. How do you think that can be stopped? Because you have litigants just filing any kind of motions, because anyone can come to the court to file a motion for custody, motion for emergency custody, or any kind of, or motion for contempt, even when they have no grounds to do so. How do you think that can be controlled or stopped?
Well, unless they're truly an excessive litigant, there is one law that helps against someone that is a continuous litigious. It's called a vexatious litigator law, but that's pretty rare. We've only had a handful. But I know what you're saying because I have those cases where it's nonstop. There's 15 motions pending amongst people that really can't stand each other, and they have kids, and they have assets, and they have property, and they have money, and they have property they want sold. So it gets kind of ugly. So other than not awarding attorney fees or awarding attorney fees to the other side because someone has increased the cost, so we can kind of look at it that way. But I can't legally stop someone from filing something. I can rule on it correctly, as do my magistrates, and you start then, of course, getting a feel for whether this is legitimate or not.
Okay. Yeah. A follow-up question to that. When it comes to awarding attorney's fee, does the other party, do they have to request it, or do you just do it without them asking?
Usually they request it. And in a contempt of court action, if someone is found in contempt, you can have the contemptor pay the attorney's fees for the person that had to file. Let's say someone is not paying child support. You give them a chance to purge, and the purge can be you will pay this, and you will pay the other side's attorney fees within 2 months or whatever. So.
Yeah. I'm talking about child support. In 2010, you have this amazing story about a gentleman. I think his name is Julius McIntyre. I don't know if you remember that case. I think it was during the recession, and he was behind on child support for maybe over 20,000. He works at Walmart. He was supposed to be sent to jail for 15 days. And it was brought before you. So instead of sending him to jail, you gave him a reprieve. Do you remember that case?
Heck no. But if you remind me a little more of the detail.
Yes. This case, it's online over there. It's one of those cases that I think he even sent you a letter, So what you did in that case is, instead of sending him to jail for 15 days, you actually gave him a reprieve. You made him go back to work, and some of those you stopped the child support from accumulating. So my question is, do you remember, even if you don't remember that particular case, this one happened in 2010, What prompted you to adjudicate that way instead of just saying, you know what, you're a deadbeat dad, you're gonna have to pay for it?
Well, you have to look at every case on, are they truly a deadbeat because they are scorched earth policy? I am not going to pay you. I told you I wasn't going to pay you, and they don't. Or is it, they can't work because their driver's license has been taken away because they haven't. It's a catch-22. That whole thing with you take someone's driver's license when they haven't paid support, then prevents them from potentially going out and getting a job. So I really have to look at every case specifically and see. I mean, what we really want is money to go to the mother to support the children. So if I think that can be achieved, that's certainly the first goal, because you still can hang over their head. You give them 10 days, but you say you can avoid this by doing X, Y, and Z. Maintaining employment, starting to pay, because that money isn't going to go away. There's still that arrearage that's going to be owed. So I don't remember. Were you happy with that or not? Or were you
Oh
looking?
yeah, it's a great case. It's out there online. He even sent you an open letter to to thank you for giving him a second chance.
I have a file about this big of nice letters to me that I don't know why I started it 24 years ago, and it's kind of grown. So I bet it is in there. And next week when I go back, I'm going to be finding that. So thank you. But I get nice notes like that. Sometimes it
Mhm.
really does make my day. I appreciate that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I have a couple of questions here sent in by people who want you to tell them what to do or give them advice on the case. Let me read one of them to you. The person asked, is a non-residential parent who pays child support eligible to claim the child as a dependent on their taxes?
It can be by agreement in any agreement between parties. They often bargain who is going to do that. If And the court can decide it too. The court could determine it if they didn't agree to it in their, let's say, shared parenting plan. But typically, no. If they don't have some kind of an agreement, I think the residential parent is going to be claiming the tax credit. They used to call it dependency exemption, but it's different now. So, they can certainly agree to it, especially if someone's paying a significant amount of support. A lot of times, people will have two children, and one will take one will take the other. So, and a lot of people put language in their decrees now. Should the government ever have the dependency exemption again, because this was like a stay of, I think, till 2025.
Hmm. Okay. What are the factors you consider when a residential parent wants to move out of state with the children?
Oh boy, those are the toughest cases. The toughest cases we handle. Um, Boy, yeah, I mean, you go through the statutory factors. What's in the best interest of the child, and you can look in the statute. It's connection to school and family, abuse by either party. Boy, I'm trying to think of them. Of course, right off the top of my head, I go through these like every time I write a decision. But every case is unique. Um, it's and it's also that ability of if people have a ton of money, they can fly back and forth. Most people don't have that. So how do you make sure that parent, if you do allow one person to move, how do you maximize the time of the other parent? Is it every spring break, every summer, most of the summer, most of Christmas, most of Thanksgiving? It's tough. Those are really tough cases. So, I mean, you just look through all the factors. Relationship with children. Has the other side been current supporting? What's the relationship with each? You do take into consideration the child's wishes if they're older, old enough, but it's really what's in their best interest.
Hmm.
So, whole myriad of things.
Okay. And what would be the visitation right of the non-residential parent if the other parent is allowed to move?
What would be the what rights? The
Oh, yeah. How will they? How would you split the visitation? Do you just make it like summertime or spring break?
well,
How does that work?
depends on how far it is. If it's 2 hours away, it's one thing. If it's California, it's another. And oh my gosh, what do you do now with COVID? Because that's played into these cases right now too. Um, I try to maximize the amount of time. If someone's going to get to move with the child far away, and then you have to look at expenses. how do you share the cost of the flight? Or is it going to be we meet halfway between here and Tennessee and we each drive? I mean, there's so many issues, and a lot of it is involved with, time, and who's got the time to do the driving, who's going to pay for the flights. Does the child need to be accompanied because the child's 8 years old and can't fly, by herself? So yeah, all I can say is that they're very tough. And sometimes I just say, first of all, you need a legitimate reason to move. Okay, that's kind of the first thing we really like to look at too. Okay,
Mm.
so sometimes you get transferred with your job, and that person has the better job, and the other person isn't even supporting the children. That might be a scenario. I mean, every case is different, but pretty much every case is pretty hard when it comes to
Okay.
that.
Yes. Yeah, I have this question about domestic violence, and this person wants to know, what do you have to prove to get an order of protection?
Well, the statute says, and these are the ones that we do, they're non-criminal, these are the civil protection orders. Imminent fear of serious physical harm, or like a stalking where you have been stalked by someone more than just like once that someone's kind of shown up. So like a pattern of stalking where it's really affecting the person mentally, it's causing them distress. So it's not too difficult to walk in and apply for one and get one. We judges hear them, but then of course the person that gets served with it gets to come in and say, "Well, this is my version of what happened," or we may not. We don't grant all of them. A lot of times people don't show up or don't pursue them. A lot of times they do show up and they drop them. We have trials and we grant them. We have trials and we don't grant them. And sometimes the person that's accused just agrees to stay away, and it's a legally enforceable order. The ones that are with.
That's good. So, in the event that you grant the protection order, does it affect the defendant's job
Oh,
or employment?
absolutely. It is not a criminal record. It is a public record. So and I think the other judges too, don't just take these lightly because it can affect someone's future. And in fact, I tell, the person that's, the victim, if it's one of those where, there are people that come in with black eyes and stitches. So, they're no brainers. But if it's one where it's he said, she said, I always do point out, um, by the way, this is a public record that could be found if this person's looking for a job. It's more men that are the people that are victimizing the women as far as the numbers that come in to me, other than if you have same gender CPOs. So I do point that out. In other words, if you seriously truly need protection, we do it. But if you're kind of doing this for some other reason, this could affect his ability to get a job and his ability to support your kids that you have together. Because a lot of times they have children together. But you also don't want that to be a reason that they fear, they don't get one either if they truly need it. So.
How has COVID-19 affect custody cases? Do
Well,
you?
we have cases where people have run in for emergency custody to get their kids back because the other parent says, you work in this field or that field, and they're not returning the children. There's been some national cases, that have had some national media attention about that. Nurses and doctors that, or nursing home workers that have had the other spouse or parent, maybe they're not married, ex-spouse, not return the child. So I don't think you should be penalized because your job is out there frontline trying to help people. So I guess that's probably the view of we judges. Now, we also have, situations where you do have a really, maybe extremely medically fragile child, but you just kind of have to hope that both parents are as worried about the health of their child. A medical worker is going to be extremely knowledgeable and worried about transmitting it to their children. So that, we have seen those kind of issues.
Yeah, there's a question here. It says, "My marriage is about 2 years old. I bought a property last year, but my wife's name is not on the deed. Would my wife be entitled to a part of the property if I were to file for divorce now?
Maybe. Um, Part of it is, yeah, I mean, it's a marital asset. If you buy something during a marriage, it's a marital asset. Now, if they've been separated for 10 years and we're going to call what's called a de facto date of marriage ending, before he bought it, that's an argument the person could make. The fact that a person's not on the deed, or the title of a car, or, I mean, let's face it, you could buy, a camera during your marriage and one person pays for it, but it's still a marital asset, or an expensive TV. So yeah, I mean, the short answer is it's right now probably a marital asset, but if you could show we've been separated, she's gone her way, I did this on my own. So, I mean, is she on the mortgage too? Because here's your other issue when you have two people on a mortgage, because she's probably not. Then it makes it complicated, as Emmanuel, when you're getting divorced and one person's keeping the property and the other person's still on the mortgage. They're going to want off that mortgage. They're not going to want to be legally liable for 15 more, 20 more years.
Yes. Then the next one. Does someone's immigration status have a bearing on their custody or divorce case?
What was the thing? That's what status?
Their immigration status?
Oh, their immigration status? I don't have too many of those. I mean, some of them I can't help that they might be getting, removed from this country. So, some, I'm trying to think, I've had a few where I think, the dad's been illegally here, but I'm still going to let him, see. But I guess probably to be safe, you would give custody to the parent that was legally in the country because one could be moved. But I don't really see it preventing, shared parenting. If one then has to leave, then it changes. But it really shouldn't change the time each person has with their child. And maybe the legal status, maybe.
Yeah. So, what are the toughest cases you've had to deal with?
Wow. Well, the custody cases that I've talked about, permanent custody. I know you were guardian ad litem on abuse, neglect, dependency cases, and cutting permanent ties with a parent is you don't take lightly, especially when the child is old enough to know and have a relationship, with the parent. Um, if it's a baby that hasn't known the parents, it's not as tough. But sometimes I talk to kids or I hear about, they're thinking they're going home with their parents and they're horrible drug addicts, and there's just no way that they're possibly maybe going to do that. So those are really tough cases. I've had enough cases where young teenagers have shot and either accidentally killed someone or intentionally shot someone in a robbery, and hearing that kind of case is pretty gut-wrenching. I have some specifics I can tell you about in a little while if you want, but juvenile cases. But yeah, those kind of cases, having someone in your court talk about their deceased child, that's pretty bad. It's about as bad as it gets.
So you deal with pretty much emotional cases. The sixth floor and the fifth floor, which is the divorce and domestic cases. I mean, those floors. That's where you handle all those cases. No, they're, I normally, I say on those, nobody wants to be there apart from the attorneys because it's apart from the attorneys and the judges. So pretty much you deal with a lot of people who are angry, frustrated, they don't want to be there. How do you get people to talk to each other and end up settling cases?
Well, the vast majority of cases do settle. That's the percentages would show that. Personally, I think part of it is, since I've been doing this so long, I can sit them down and say, look, give me a short version of the scenario. And then I'm going to say, look, I haven't heard all the facts, but I've had this kind of case, and this is typically how I've handled it in the past. I often just tell people, do things that are fair, because sometimes there may be a case law that'll say, well, this is a marital asset technically, but yet, so-and-so's family really gave it to one side, or it was a really big gift of a lot of money. And, you're no worse off by walking away from a 2-year marriage. Let's say it's a short-term marriage and one side of the family is given a whole lot of money or put a big down payment on a house. And I just try to kind of say logically, you know that was from their family. Why are you digging your heels in and saying, gimme, gimme, gimme? Sometimes it's just like a fairness argument. And then a lot of times with, with their children, I just say, your children better than I do, or a magistrate. Try to do what's in your child's best interest and love your kids more than you can't stand your partner. Because, sometimes that gets in the way, that control, that power thing. And those are the kind of cases that typically go to trial because there's one person that just can't give up, an inch. And it's a real sort of power thing, more so than you could figure out some logical way to divide up the time with your kids. So that's kind of two ways. Oh, and then you just say how expensive it is to try a case, of course, or how long it's going to take. And now with, COVID, how long it's really going to take to get your case to trial. A lot of people are settling. We're doing a lot of Zoom settlement conferences. So.
Okay. And who presides over those settlement conferences? Is it the mediator or the magistrate?
Oh, no, we do. I do. I talk to them. Did you say who presides over it? Now, we, of course, have a mediation department. But as far as settlement conferences, no, I encourage the lawyers and the parties, and sometimes we have experts. So you could have 6 people easily, 2 lawyers, the 2 parties, maybe 2 competing experts on a settlement conference. Now, I know a lot of them are doing that on their own because I have, so I've got a couple cases that are worth in the tens of many millions of dollars, and there's a lot of experts and business evaluations, and they are trying to work it out, and they're all Zooming because some of them have health issues and don't want to all be in a room together. I also know one lawyer that rented out just a giant room to do a big arbitration where they had paid an arbitrator, but it was like a giant ballroom, so they could really spread out. Now you got to have money to do that, but if you have the means, you could do that.
Yeah. So what has been your experience with trying to resolve cases over Zoom or trying to, well, you haven't tried any cases over Zoom, but trying to resolve it? Is it different from having the parties in the courtroom or doing it remotely?
Well, it's different, but it's the best we got. So it's not impossible. I would say that. I mean, I'd way rather have real life people in front of me. On the other hand, you can watch some people's body language that they're just not really paying attention to the reticence of giving into the other side. So that's been kind of interesting. But you can see that in a courtroom too. But sometimes you're like, lady or husband or whatever, you're on the screen. I can see what you're doing there. So that's been kind of fun.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Family Recovery Court, which you started or which you've been administering since 2002?
Sure. We were the first drug court in Franklin County, one of the first in Ohio. And it started, and I was actually able to hear the cases. It's grown so much that a magistrate is now handling both juvenile and family recovery court, but I still get to oversee the graduations, which are absolutely the highlight of my month, my 6 months or whatever. And in fact, I've got a really kind of a cool poem I might want to read the end of about this. But so parents that have lost or are at risk of losing their kids to children's services voluntarily enter our program. It's usually 9 to 12 months, and we have access to treatment faster. It's a team collaborative effort with the public defender, with the prosecutor's office, with treatment providers, and they come to court frequently. And then when they go through phase 1, 2, 3, 4, they come to court less frequently, and then they culminate in a graduation. And we hope to keep them sober for life, to stop the cycle of addiction with their children. Last year, 2019, we had 35 children return to parents from foster care, and we had 3 babies born drug-free to mothers that were addicts before. So that's the Family Recovery Court. I got to read you this because this is what they do at our graduation. Sometimes they say where they want to be in 5 years, and they maybe write a poem or tell their story. But a couple days ago, one of them, just wrote this back, and I'm only reading the end of it, but she was sexually abused. I mean, she had a horrible life. She talks about in the first part of this poem, but at the end, she says, Do I want to be the victim or a victor? I chose the latter. I will stand tall and proud, keep my voice up towards the clouds, giving my boys and girls the life and love I never had in this world. I've come to prove my enemies wrong, that every time you fall, it's only making your chin strong. What do I see in the future of myself? A powerful voice, 4 kids, and one hell of a story to tell. So, to all who doubt this program, I can speak until I'm blue in the face, but you will never believe it until you watch me finish this race and take my place. So, she's writing that to the future and the people, that her peers, because they all meet at court, although now they all meet by Zoom. But so you have people that are 12 months in and people that are brand new. So that kind of poem, really strengthens our desire to help people, because that's what it's all about. Just and we see them in graduations. We did a Zoom graduation for Family Recovery Court um, a couple months ago, and I did it from my courtroom with this giant screen, and I had about 30 little screens going with these women holding their kids, running around in the background. We had to mute them all, but and then we did this virtual handover. And we had her little daughter, have a copy of her certificate of graduation. So we pretended to hand it off to her, and then she gave it to her mom. So it's really a fulfilling part of my job. It's one of the things I just love about it.
So it's more about helping the family.
Yes, it is helping keep families together. It is hoping to stop the cycle of addiction, because it can go to their kids. And it's interesting because just about every person that gets up there, we do graduations live normally, pre-pandemic, and they get up on the stage, and some of them are nervous, and but it's interesting because they almost always say, I want a home for my kids, and I want to be clean and sober, simple things like that. But
Wow. How do you get people to go into the program? Do you compel them to go, or do you just offer it to them?
we offer it to them. We try to, give them poems like that. We try to show them. We're going to be putting together, like a video for them to watch of some prior graduates. We're hoping to do that to kind of sell them. But we invite them to come watch a drug court. They used to come live. Now they can join in on Zoom, and their attorneys can refer them. Magistrates can refer them from an abuse, neglect, dependency case. It's not mandatory. It's all voluntary. So.
And do they have to pay for it?
No, and they get really fast access sometimes to treatment, and we work with Ohio Guidestone and in different programs that they're just godsends. They have mentors. We have women that are, we call them parenting mentors, and they will help these women navigate getting public housing, getting their water turned on, paying $1,000 bill because they've been evicted and they have utility bills that are outstanding. So, there's a lot of advantages to it. So I don't think it's too hard of a sell. We have a few drop out that can't stay clean and sober, but on the other hand, we graduate, probably 8 to 12 every year, typically. It kind of changes depending on the year. So,
and how long is the program?
Depending on how fast they go through it, it's typically 9 to 12 months. I mean, we occasionally have had someone get done in 6 months, just blast through it. We can help them, find jobs. They are to try and find a job if they can, and sometimes they have too many little kids at home. But that's about how long it takes.
Okay. Do they have to have a connection with the court system before they can be part of the program, or can someone who's listening out there who thinks I need this help, can they just walk in and say I want to be a part of it?
They have to be, involved with an abuse, neglect, dependent case, or a referral that's kind of on the verge of that from Children's Services. But yeah, no, unfortunately.
Okay. And whose idea was this?
Whenever it started in 2002, my colleague, Yvette McGee-Brown, I don't know who approached her about it, but this was like a new movement, and she got the ball rolling, but then she left to become the director of the Center for Family Safety and Healing. So I took up the ball when it was still in its planning stages, and we met with the county commissioners and the public defenders and the prosecutors, and it was, the top people in all those entities, and then we started it. So yeah, and she's still a good friend and colleague, as you know. So
Okay. Yeah. So, what are those notable cases that you've presided over the years, if you can remember one or two of them?
I'm sorry, I missed
What are
that.
those notable cases that you would like to share
Oh,
with us?
oh yeah. I had the first jury trial on what was called a serious youthful offender case, and we can talk about bindover cases in a second. But it was really pretty horrible. It was a kid who had absolutely no record, strong mother working, taking care of him, and he was hanging out probably with a couple kids older, a little bit in the wrong crowd, and there was a fight that was going to occur later, and his friend had a gun, and his friend was fighting and said, grab the strap, and I think he was afraid that his friend was going to get hurt, and he shot into, kind of into the air into this crowd, and he shot and killed that friend's 13-year-old sister. And I mean, he was devastated. He didn't mean to kill anybody. It's a very tough case. He was charged with murder. Luckily, the jury, which there's only been, I think, two in the history of Ohio, these type of cases, but I had the first one. But the jury came back with, I think it was involuntary manslaughter. I can't quite remember. It's been about 15 years or so. But it ruined his life. He became drug addicted when he first came out, because he was only held till age 21. I tried to help get this young man into the College of Art and Design here in Columbus, because he was really talented. His family had brought me over a picture of a sketch he had done of his niece. But that fell through, and I've kind of maintained a friendship with his mother, and it troubles him. I think he probably needs counseling, because she's tried to get that, but people try to hide their pain with drugs or
Mhm.
marijuana or whatever. So that one was a really interesting case. Um, that was what's called a discretionary bind over, because he was under 16 when that murder charge happened. Another case I had was, some of your listeners may remember, it was an identical twins case where the one boy, Dennis, was shot by some intruders, some robbers, in his mother's little, they had a really small house. They, as the mother said, were poor. And some masked, people came in, and she had multiple sclerosis, couldn't really get up. And they said, "Where's the money? Where's the money?" Like they knew there was some large amount of money. She said, "We're poor. We don't have any money." And they ransacked the house. And in the other bedroom, she heard this fight going on. And her one son was shot, not like execution style, but like he might have been grabbing a gun by the way the bullet. He was shot and killed. His identical twin was at another home, the home of his girlfriend, because these boys had shared, a small room, and they were almost 18. And it was all over the news, because these boys were good grades, going to college, in the band. I think they were in sports together too. They worked together at the grocery store. They were inseparable. They were peas in a pod. And 2 weeks later, you find out that the identical twin is now charged with murdering his identical twin. And I ended up getting a case. It was, gut wrenching, because when the trial went on, the mother, had to go through what happened, finding her dying son and calling her daughter who lived next door to come over. And the young man, Darius, was one of those kids that just looks you in the eye and you knew. He just was like, "I didn't do this. I want to be, found, innocent eventually, but I'm still in the juvenile court." And because they were just weeks from their 18th birthday, because it was a murder case, it was what was called a mandatory bind over. If I found just probable cause, just enough that he may have been there. And there was some experts saying that even though identical twins don't have identical fingerprints and handprints. So there was some testimony that there was this bloody palm print that they tried to show that Dennis, the one that was living, had been there. He must have been there. He must have been one of these masked intruders that his mother just didn't know. I didn't really believe that, but I had this bloody handprint, so it went over to adult court. I set bond, either a recog bond or extremely low, because his family was just adamant, and the courtroom was filled with his teachers and every walk of life of student that was supporting him. And he was just steadfast. I just felt there's no, you don't kill your identical twin. It's like part of you. So long story short, it was a real. So it went to adult court. I set bond really low, so he was out for 3 or 4 days, and then. When he went to the adult court, because it was a murder charge, they set bond really high, like $1 million that he couldn't afford. He was in jail. It went to trial. I went and watched part of the trial, and he kind of looked over his shoulder at me, gave me a nod, I gave him a nod, and then there was a mistrial. But it turned out his great lawyers got an investigator that looked deeper into it, and there was a mix-up on this handprint. And it turned out that the handprint wasn't the one in blood. It was an invisible handprint that was some other protein, like it could have been grease from, a hamburger or hair gel or whatever. And so he was acquitted, but they dropped all the charges. But he spent 18 months in prison as a result. And he's the most incredible man. He's now I think 30, and I talked to him a couple months ago. But I wish, had that been a non-mandatory bind over, that is one where I would have had the discretion to say, this is going to stay here, and he wouldn't have necessarily been held for that long. So that's kind of was some eye-opening experiences on that whole mandatory bind over law, which people don't understand it. You do certain crimes like aggravated robbery, murder, and you're 16 or 17 up until the day before you're 18. There's a law in Ohio that says if there's just a little bit of evidence, over 50%, they get bound over to adult court, unless they make a plea. They make deals with prosecutors stuff. But yeah, a lot of miscommunication on this whole handprint thing. That it's pretty scary. Could have gone to jail for a long, long time, and over something is that people still think. There's some people out there that still think he did it. And what kills me is no one's been found to have caused, it's an unsolved murder. But it turns out he'd had a cousin, I think, that was running drugs in Portsmouth, Ohio. And the evidence came out later in the trial that this young man, I think in his trial in Portsmouth, mentioned that he had lived on, I think it was Loretta Avenue. And this robbery happened really shortly after that hearing. And if that had been looked into better, maybe instead of focusing it on him, it's just one of those cases that stays with you.
It's so sad. At least you did the best for him. You stood with him, you believed him, and eventually you were right.
You do really. I did think the whole time, this was an African American youth, didn't have any money, wonderful family support from his mother and his sister. And you do think, well, if this had happened in an affluent neighborhood, would they have focused so much on him, or would they have said, no, this is absolutely right. Nobody kills their twin. And as I was sitting there, I thought, well, maybe they know something I don't know. Maybe he's involved in drugs, and that's why they're going after him. But no, he was a good kid. There was nothing. So anyway, that one stays with me, and I want to see the right people charged and found guilty on that one. But who knows if they're even still alive?
Who knows? Can you tell us about your re-election process?
Sure. It went from having fundraisers with people to having a virtual fundraiser, which we've had a really a quite fun one, where one of my team came up with this idea of a pie in the face of lawyers, and let's vote with money on who gets the pie. And it was really fun. I mean, it was just a half hour, 40-minute online, and money kept coming in at the end, and the numbers going up on two people that were neck and neck, and their relatives are giving money because they want their husband or brother or whatever to get the pie in the face. So we've done that, but social media is really important. So I hope your listeners like what they hear and tell all their friends and tell their friends. So yeah, other than trying to raise money, get on TV, no different than any other year, other than lawyers are hurting because some of them aren't making the money, aren't having the cases, and that's a lot of your support system if you're a judge running for office, as far as contributions in addition to your family and friends.
Hmm. And you spent 24 years on the bench, possibly the longest serving judge on the domestic court. Is that accurate?
You, the oldest serving, the longest.
The
Oh yeah,
yes.
I'm
Okay.
one of the longest in the county now. I think Lisa
In the
Savage.
county now. Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah,
Can you tell the people why they should keep you?
sure. Well, I would say look to what lawyers that practice in my court think about me. And every 2 years, the bar association has a poll. They have two. They have a preference poll that's coming out later on who they prefer, between the two candidates, and then they have one that your peers that appear in front of you, such as you, Emmanuel, you get to fill out a rating, and I'm always, pretty highly rated, and highest in my group of ratings is, my temperament. I think when you come to court, you want someone that's fair, which I try to be, regardless of race, gender, age, anything, economic status, or whether you may not have the better attorney in the room. You look at the facts. I think I'm creative in trying to help get people to settle cases. I like to throw in some humor. My staff tries to treat people well, and if you come in with a complicated business case or not complicated, I mean, you want someone, I think, that knows what they're doing, that's handled that kind of case. Before I took the bench, I did a fair amount of family law. I also did trial work. I had done jury trials in 3 counties and trials around the state. So, in integrity, just I think if you think the person has integrity or not, honesty. But I would say the ratings of the people that come before me, I'm always pretty highly rated, up there with the top judges of the 30 that I'm rated with every year. Well, not every year, but every 2 years. So I would say that speaks for me.
Okay.
So,
Are you also highly rated with the bar association?
am I what?
Are you highly rated with the bar association?
Yeah, they haven't done their preference between the two candidates yet. That comes out in August because I have my appointment. They do that. They meet with you. These are going to be by Zoom instead of live. But this is like that's their preference poll. The other one is called their I think it's the judicial. I'm trying to think of the name of it here. Judicial poll or something, a professionalism poll or something that the bar association does every 2 years. So they kind of let you know how you're doing. I would say that. So.
Okay. Since you deal with a lot of emotional cases, it's hard to, take on all this trauma and go home and just be the normal you. What do you do for self care?
Um, you mean I didn't catch that. You said, what do you do?
What do you do for self care? How do you take care of yourself to make
Okay.
sure you don't
Yeah,
get burnt out?
yeah, yeah. They do. Some of them do stick with you, and it's hard. Some of them, people are happy. They get their divorce. It's uncontested. But the tough cases, like I told you about, there's some visions you have of pictures of pools of blood or people shot that it's really hard to get out of your head. I used to do a lot of sports. Now I walk because I have a bad back. But yeah, just try to relax, read, walk, hang out with my family. Sometimes you can't get it out of your head, but you just know it's part of the job. Okay, so.
So it's been 24 years, so you're kind of used to it. Is that accurate?
To it, uh, I you still feel the same pain if there's some parent in front of you that's lost a child. So you kind of get used to some of it. You get quick at it. You get efficient at it. I think you get good at helping people settle because this is what the law is. This is what I can do. This is what a typical spousal support number is going to be, or this is how we can divide up this business fairly. So it's really great to have someone with experience doing that because it saves you time and money. Frankly, as a litigant or a lawyer, knowing someone that's consistent and fair, so and has integrity and a good temperament. That's.
Yeah. So do you get people asking you legal questions when you're outside just socializing? Like, hey, Judge, Do you get people doing that, asking you legal questions?
Yeah, you do, and you can't really answer them. Yeah.
I know you can. I'm not talking about specific cases. People just wanting to pick your brains. Do you get
So,
that?
yeah. Oh, yeah. You can tell them like the process. Like in general terms, I can say, look, this is the process, or this is how we figure out child support. We take your income and his income, her income, and any daycare expenses, that kind of thing. So sure you do. And then a lot of times they'll ask me about stuff I have no clue, you know. And it's like, no, that's not my bailiwick. That's a different judge. That's a different specialty. So then I'll just tell them, no.
Yeah.
So
And I see that you have a bachelor's in journalism. That's my first degree too. So do you get to practice the craft?
um, only the fact that I like to write, and I like to write, kind of creatively. I never practiced it in in a paying manner where I think you said you were an intern and I know. So I never did. I went straight to law school.
Hmm.
But I think it was just a great major to do. The Ohio State had a journalism school at the time, and just doing the photography too was a blast. I just really enjoyed doing
Okay.
that.
Why did you decide to go into law?
I think it's kind of my natural personality to try to be a lawyer. So my parents kind of um, my whole family was educators. My grandparents were immigrants, and then they really valued education, and most of my family were teachers, principals. And I think my mother was just kind of looked at me and went, yeah, maybe law school. My parents were probably right about that. Kind of fit my personality. So
Wow.
I
I'm
wrote.
proud.
Go ahead.
Right.
I was just gonna say wasn't one of those people that was, oh, I'm gonna be a judge someday, because there really weren't very many women judges at the time, and so it just kind of happened. So
So what inspired you to run the first time, 24 years ago?
I have a brother that's really politically active, and he had said, have you ever thought about running for judge? And frankly, I said no. I had done trial practice, and honestly, I worked on some campaigns and knew some judges that I liked and were impressed by. And then it really was an eye-opening experience that was an unfavorable one with a judge that has since been disbarred many, many years ago, not in my court. And I actually just thought, I can treat people nicely, and I know I'm as smart as that person was. So then I thought, I can do that. And then some opportunities came up, so I decided to run. And the seat this was an open seat. It was when they added a fifth judge 25 years ago. So I ran for that open seat. So, and it was in the court in which I had done a lot of practice, and the court, frankly, where I wanted to be. So yeah, so worked out.
And
My job. I love all the walks of life and all the people we get to see from every country and hearing their traditions. I'll hear about how they've been married in another country and have to decide, one will say, well, that wasn't real. We didn't really get married. Another one will say, yeah, that process was legit. So that's been really interesting too. Getting to see other cultures. It's really wonderful.
you're a trailblazer because at the time you became judge, they only few female judges on the bench. How did you handle that pressure?
Um, at the time I ran, frankly, you had an advantage if you were a woman running. So we were just kind of coming on the scene um, at the time. So I don't know. I was in a male dominated world. Let's face it. I was with a law firm. Both my law firms had all men. The small one and then the second one I went to, there was like 7 of us. So yeah, I was kind of used to it. I have 2 brothers, so I played sports. I ran around in the neighborhood. It didn't really faze me. That hasn't intimidated me. So,
Oh,
and
that's impressive.
what was more intimidating was, when I was only 37 when I took the bench, a lot of the people that were practicing, had been practicing 20, 30, 40 years longer than I. And I never was a know-it-all. I was always, hey, I respected the fact they knew more than I did probably. And so treated people that way. But, I think very important to not think I'm walking on here and I know more than you, because I didn't. And so that was way more intimidating. And then, I did the divorce of like one of my law school professors, which is a little bizarre. he didn't, I mean, he taught a certain, certain class, so that kind of thing's kind of odd.
Hmm. It's humbling. Wow. So, how can people reach out to you to support your campaign?
Well, the names are all so close. I have to refer to. We have a website, www.reelectjudgeprice.com. On Facebook, I'm Reelect Judge Dana Preisse, and on Instagram, just Judge Preisse. And at some point, we'll be listing all the endorsements and even more because they're just coming out now and just more qualifications. But right now, we just started all those, and there's postings on there all the time. And yeah, I would really appreciate anybody's support. And I so appreciate you putting me on your show to get the word out to your listeners. Anybody that would ever have any questions, though, my court number is 614-525-5775. And I can talk about process. I can't talk about your individual case, other than if you're saying like, what's the status of it? But sure, courts are open to the public right now. They're not really letting a whole lot of people up that don't have cases in front of us because of COVID. If you don't have a case or you're a witness, they're really trying to maintain fewer people in the courthouse. Not my decision, but that's kind of what's going on in Franklin County.
Thank you. And that's Judge Dana Preisse of the Franklin County Domestic Court, Ohio.
Yeah, in juvenile court.
In juvenile court. She's running for re-election. She's been on the bench for over 24 years. So this is going to be is it sixth term?
Yes. I think, wait, I have to do the math. Yeah.
Yes.
No, fifth. Wait a minute. What have I done? 24. This will be my fifth.
Wow. Congratulations. So thank you for coming on the show, and thank you for spending taking the time and answering all those questions.
I hope we get to see you live and in person, that we have vaccines and that we're all safe and you can come down to court in person, and that we could have done it in person. I hope
so too. And for the people out there, thank you for joining us again on Legal Angle with Emmanuel the Law Oluwale. This is it for now. I'll be with you again next week on another episode of Legal Angle. Thank you and have a good day.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.